Hey everybody, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. This is Harriet Kamek with Down to Earth. It's the show in which we talk about the issues that matter. And while it is cold outside, finally winter has arrived in my neck of the woods in Michigan, southeast Michigan. My goodness, are we ever under a deep freeze? But we're used to it. It's kind of like, okay, it's January. This is what January looks like in Michigan. So nobody's complaining about the ice or the snow. We're just like, it's Michigan. It is what it is. So thank you so much for joining us. We're still in a little bit of a halo because guess what? The Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. Finally, a different team from the New England Patriots is going to the Super Bowl. And I can't hear anything out of anybody. Come on, all my Twitter friends and Periscope friends, I thought you all were with me on this. Is that it? You're just gonna leave me out here like that? You're not saying anything, right? The Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. Finally, we have a different kind of representation. Aren't you all happy? I mean, just think about it. The Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers and the 49ers. What a difference. Right? Hey, and the Lions ain't going. We'll talk about the Lions. They kill you around here if you talk about the Lions. I kid you not. Detroit is one of those cities. Michigan, we have only one football team in the entire state. It's because most of our population is in lower Michigan, right? But you can't talk about the Lions. If you're not saying something complimentary about the Lions here, you're in trouble. So I lost some people unfriended me on Facebook years ago because I said the Lions suck. So I've learned, if I'm not going to say anything good about the Lions, they will take you on. Somehow the Detroit Lions inspire a kind of community and a solidarity with its fans. It doesn't matter if they lose the game. Those folks are standing. They drive through snow on I-75 to go watch that game. I kid you not. They're standing in the stands. Go Lions! Go Lions! And this is me. Right? Incredible. So it's Tuesday, thankfully. So it looks like it's going to be a good week. You know why? Because we had a holiday yesterday, right? So that means it's a shortened work week. So those of you who just went back to work this morning, I know you're groaning, but you're kind of like smiling because you're like, guess what? It's a short work week, right? Must be something in the water. You need to quit. Quit. Right? It's the lakes. It's the lake effect. It's the lake effect. It's the lake effect, right? So today we're going to talk about what will America do with its abandoned churches. We see that a lot here in the Metro Detroit area, but as I looked at it, I wondered if the same thing was happening across the country. And much to my chagrin, I discovered that there are other cities in the country where churches, Christian places of worship, are being abandoned. Now imagine, I cannot believe that in 2020, when I describe a church, I have to attach a meaning to it. Because once upon a time, America was described as a Christian country, which meant that most of the population were Christians, identified as Christians. Now, when I go into spaces, I have to describe a church as a Christian place of worship. A church is the name for a Christian place of worship. And that Christianity is one of the world religions, right? Imagine that. So we're going to delve a little deeply into why churches, why Christian churches, why churches are being abandoned, right? Well, there are a couple of things. Churches pop everywhere where you are. Well, I don't know where that is, but we're seeing it mostly in post-industrial cities. So in the study that I read, they looked at Buffalo, New York. Buffalo, New York is kind of similar in demographics to Detroit because Buffalo is largely an immigrant city. A lot of people started migrating there from the 1800s, and then later on we saw a lot of blacks from the South began migrating to Buffalo because it was an industrial city. So Buffalo has always attracted immigrants. Same is true of Detroit. Detroit, blacks from the South followed the train line to migrate out of Jim Crow. Look at my face when I say Jim Crow, right? I have people on my YouTube channel who last year gave me hell, right? But so they followed the train line, so Detroit was also a train stop. So Detroit, Milwaukee, Chicago, Cleveland, and of course they went west to California. So because Detroit is now considered a post-industrial city, naturally there were immigrants here, not just from the American South, but immigrants from other parts of the world. So we have always had a sort of diverse culture, but Christianity was the prevailing religion. Catholicism was the major denomination, and they owned a lot of church property, not just here in Detroit, but throughout the world, throughout the country. Well, after the scandal, the sex scandal that hit the Catholic Church, naturally, a lot of Catholic churches became empty. A lot of facilities became empty. They just kind of sat there. The Catholic Church owns them, but they're not making any money from it. Parishioners disappeared, dried up. Either people became disenchanted with the faith and found other forms of religion to satiate their desire for spiritual needs, or they just simply didn't go back to church. So in Detroit, on the east side of Detroit, what you find is that a lot of former Catholic churches are being converted into other forms of worship, other Christian denominations, African Methodist, Baptist, Missionary Baptist, and so on. That has been true since the decline began in the late 1980s through the 90s, through the 2000s to now. But in looking at the overall problem and looking at what are considered post-industrial cities, because we're no longer an industrial society, we're now an information technology society. That's what we sell to the world. Our major, if you look at who our major billionaires are, they are people who traffic in information. Their commerce is information. Bill Gates, computers, information, dissemination. Facebook, right? Twitter, right? When you look at them, that's what they traffic in. So what we sell to the world now, we're leading, sort of, because we're telling the world, and have been telling the world since the 1990s, that information technology is the big thing. That's the industry. So what America did, they thought they were smart. They parceled off industrialization and manufacturing to other parts of the world because they didn't want the smog and they couldn't be bothered. It was cheaper to make goods and services. They were mean. They didn't want to pay American workers because they wanted more profits. But what that did was it made in China an industrial giant. It made China great because now China is an industrial and manufacturing giant. Sucks. Didn't foresee that one coming, did they? Right? It also it helped India because it created a middle class in India. No doubt about that. But you also made India an information giant because now everybody can replicate what they see happens in the States, and in some cases they even innovate. They create stuff. They're very smart people in India. The engineers they're very smart people in India who come up with unique and efficient ways to do what we do in information technology. So what we did was we built up India. Now we love India, right? We love India and Indians. We love that they love themselves, they, apart from their rape culture, but they do take care of their families, right? And they promote their society and they travel a lot. Did you know that? Indians travel a lot. So America, building up these other countries, created a middle class, and these folks travel a lot. So people from China and India who now suddenly find themselves middle class, they travel. So during the summer months, right, they take their families all over Europe. You've seen them here in America. They go to South America. They just travel a lot. Not a bad idea. But what of the churches? Somebody's saying it's all part of the capitalist agenda. Possibly. Let's see how it pans out though. But what about the churches? What about the churches that used to dominate? The churches where people who identified as Christian went into worship. those churches are now sitting empty, whether it was caused by scandal, sex scandal, especially in the Catholic Church, but it's also caused by migratory patterns. People who used to attend church have gotten older. Younger people don't attend church or don't identify as being Christian or don't even identify as being religious. Certainly are not going to get up and go to church on a Sunday morning. No, those churches are being repurposed. And guess what we are finding? You know what was the unique crux that I saw? Those churches are being repurposed in one instance as an Islamic mosque and in another instance as a Buddhist temple. When I looked at the model of how the Islamic faith creates a worship center, what I have found is that that mosque is a community center. People going to the mosque not just to worship, but there's a school there. There is daycare right there on the premises, right? There's food there to be distributed. There is a place for immigrants who come from other lands who need to be oriented to the new community. There's a place for that assimilation to take place. Much like how the migratory patterns began in the 1800s with Europeans coming to the States and created spaces where people who were coming in could be inducted into the new culture. These spaces now being occupied that were formerly Christian, now being occupied by other religious groups. So I have this question. This is my question. Did Christianity miss its mark? Did Christianity miss its mark? Because here's the thing. Christianity did not set itself up as being relevant to the community. Did it? Really? Did it? And I'm a Christian, so that's my disclaimer right there. I am a Christian. I'm an ordained minister. A Christian ordained minister. My title is Reverend. But I am posing the question, did the church miss its mark in the community? Did the church answer in the last 50 to 60 years? Did the church answer the needs of the community? When the society began changing and we were no longer an industrial society, did the church set up spaces for retraining people? Did the church answer the needs of parents who had to go to work? Did the church provide daycare on its facility? Did the church feed the homeless? Did the church take in the people who were on the street recovering from alcoholism? Did the church take, when the drug epidemic began, did the church provide drug treatment centers for people? When alcoholism became a problem and the moral code fell away, you can call it immorality, whatever you want to call it, people started drinking to cope. The church became what? Sanctimonious. And the church became so highfalutin and pointed fingers and self-righteous. It pointed fingers at people who were just trying to find ways to cope. What the church referred to as immorality were people trying to find ways to cope with the changing economics of the day. It's clear. That's all that it was. So then when the church stopped feeding the needs of the community, what happens is that the church stopped being relevant to the community and the community moved on and sought its needs elsewhere. The church model, as stated in the New Testament, was that everything you needed was supposed to be provided in the church. That was what the church was supposed to do. If you read the New Testament, that's what it was supposed to do. So if as time evolved and people changed, that's another thing with the church. It just stays stuck in tradition. It doesn't move. It doesn't realize that people have needs. It doesn't realize that people develop stuff, that stuff happens. How are you going to criticize people and point fingers at people who are trying to cope with a husband that ran off with the secretary, or a husband that ran off with the other daughter, or a husband that ran off with the best friend? And people are trying to cope, but you're going to point fingers at people and being self-righteous and sanctimonious instead of responding to the needs of the people. So the church missed its mark. And in missing its mark, half a century later, churches are empty. So the Catholic Church is in the business of owning buildings. It's a business. So in some spaces, not just, I've read stories in San Antonio and Houston, what the Catholic Church has done is sold off its properties. They've either converted them to museums, offices, apartment complexes, right? And in some places, performing spaces. But inevitably and invariably, the mark is that it used to be a church. Now, when you go to a mosque, they have centers there. There are things there for people to do. It's the center of the community. There are churches right here in Detroit, right now in Detroit, that are closed, and the homeless are on the streets cold and frozen. And there are churches with spaces that are closed. But guess what? Come Sunday morning, they want to collect your money and tell you you must tithe. How are you going to tithe to places and spaces and you don't answer to the needs of the people, but you want my money? You want people's money. That's a question I've been asking for 10 years. They've thrown me out of churches. They've put out the unwelcome mat at churches when I start asking questions. You're not responding to the needs of the community. When you're not responding to sex trafficking because there are people in your congregation who are having sex with minors and having sex with undocumented immigrants, taking advantage of people, right? Selling people, right? But you're not responding to the needs of the people when they have been trafficked. You're not responding to the needs of people who are trying to find coping mechanisms to cope with the issues of the time. You're not relevant. But I guarantee you right now that large churches in Detroit are closed and people need shelter. And it's cold. It feels like 12 degrees. The thermostat might be saying it's 21 degrees, but it feels like 12 degrees. I went out there this morning. I had to take my daughter to school because I didn't want her to drive on icy roads. And I kid you not, it's cold. My fingers. I didn't wear my gloves. And you know me, I don't like big fluffy coats. So, you know, I probably had on a coat that you wear in the fall at 40 degrees, right? And I didn't have a hat on. No scarf. So I felt the cold. And I'm getting into a car with heat, coming from a building with heat. And I had to say to myself, if this is what I feel like, knowing that I'm getting into a car with heat, knowing that I am going to get into a building with heat, people who are homeless, and in homeless facilities, in homeless shelters, people are driven out by 7 a.m. in the mornings. All day they wander up and down in the cold. Meanwhile, churches are vacant. Guess what? They're going to continue to be vacant because the people are saying, you don't meet my needs. Look at the community. I remember once I sat before a pastor and I said, have you looked at the community in which the church is located? I said, there are drug problems here. There are problems with teenage pregnancy. There are problems with abortions. There are problems with alcohol. There are problems with divorce. And you create programs that respond to your idea of what you should do, but not what the community needs. I said, how long do you think you're going to remain relevant? You drive from wherever you live and you come to the church. And when you go to the church, you don't deal with the people in the church. He laughed at me because he's the bishop. And at the time he's sitting and looking around and all is well in his world. No, his church is practically empty, and I dare say it's going to be unoccupied. Why? Because it does not respond to the needs of the community. Are you hearing me? So what will happen to abandoned churches? Vast majority of them don't make the grade. Black preacher lead us astray. Why am I bad? Pastor not cold though. Hey. The pastor isn't cold though. Man, dude, stop. I agree with you. Right? Do you know, I couldn't have a building as a church and call myself a preacher with a building and people are out on the street. I would have a place to take them in. I couldn't do that because then what is the fulfillment of the Christian edict? Have you ever been in, there's a community right here in Detroit called Hamtramck, right? Hamtramck was once a Polish settlement. A lot of Polish immigrants had settled there. Well, once they assimilated, they moved around into the general community and assimilated, right? Now, there are more Bangladeshi immigrants who live in Hamtramck than anybody else. When you go into their community, you get a sense of community. First of all, The signs are written in languages that their people can understand. Secondly, their community centers around their worship areas for people who have issues. Everything that a new immigrant could need, they got it. They're responding to the needs of the community. Do you see what I'm saying? Churches don't do that. Churches have stopped doing that. But what they do, they like to talk about separation of church and state, which is total baloney, because what they do is support political figures. That they do. They endorse political platforms, they support political figures, but in terms of addressing the needs right there, they don't do that. And of course, they alienate people like you and I. I was ordained in one such church. At the time, I thought this was it. Right? I thought this was it. But then as I began to study it, I began to see that the church has no correlation. We have an epidemic in this community right here in Detroit. We have an epidemic of AIDS. We have an epidemic of hepatitis A, people having sex, unprotected sex. And men who are having sex with men are also having sex with women. So black women are getting infected, right, with AIDS, with HIV than anybody else. The church doesn't talk about that. There are black men who are on the down low. They're having sex with both men and women and pretending that they're married. Or pretending that they only have sex with women, but having sex with both and having unprotected sex. The church doesn't talk about that. Do you see what I'm saying? 100 years ago, the problem was not HIV. 100 years ago, the problems that society faced were not HIV, were not alcoholism and drugs. The problems they faced then were different. The problems people are facing today are homelessness, as defined by economic public policy, as outlined by politicians, executed by politicians that have rendered groups of people homeless. People don't have nothing, y'all. People are broken, so they're trying to cope. People are lonely because men just feel like that it's an immoral place. Everybody just do what they want to do. They go from one partner to the other, have sex with multiple people, and nobody holds them accountable. The church doesn't stand up and say, you really should be married to just one person. You see what I'm saying? So people married this, they're married to that, they have multiple families, the children are messed up, the wives are messed up, and the one man who creates the multiple families, nobody ain't talking to it. The problems the problems people face today are different from what they faced 100 years ago. Today we have issues with homosexuality. We have people who don't know what kind of sex they like. They don't even know what gender they are. They don't know if they're male, if they're female. They don't know what turns them on. In the meantime, while they're trying to figure that out, they're having sex with people to see what they are or what they like. And they're creating problems. What is the church doing? And many of us have people in our families who are like that. It's not unique. You're not the only one with it. I have it. It happens in my family. People don't know what they are. What am I going to do? Hate them? What am I going to do? Tell them they're not welcome? Listen to me carefully. One of the largest segments of the homeless population are young people who are coming out. They decide to tell their family that they're gay, whether they're male, so if they're male, you know, they're homosexual or lesbian, or they're transgender. You know what families do? They put them out. Why are you putting your kids out and then you go to church and hold your hands up and speak in tongues? Why are you putting your kids out? Why? And call yourself Christian. So these same people say, well, what kind of God you serve? I don't want to have anything to do with that. Because you're going to put me out and tell me I can't live in your house with that demon. You are the demon. Do you see what I'm saying? So churches have become irrelevant. The Catholic Church, at the same time that it was giving out mass and giving out communion, the same father was fondling little boys and little girls and having sex with little boys. And the Catholic Church still dares to say that they believe in celibacy. There ain't no thing like celibacy. Come on now. How are you going to tell a man that he's celibate from the time he's 15 and 20 up until he's a grown man? Come on. The Catholic Church is who perverted that and made it a way of life and perpetrated homosexuality on the public. The Catholic Church is directly responsible for that. Consequently, their churches were the first ones that emptied out. Because once the veil was removed and the scales fell off people's eyes, they could see for what it is. Because most of us realize that it is impossible for you to be celibate. It's abnormal. You're working on a book called Before We Were Christians. Congratulations. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm saying? Are you hearing me, people? This is, so what will America do with its abandoned churches? That's a darn good question. How about giving them to community groups so that people in the community can have a gathering center? Just like in immigrant communities, there is a gathering center for immigrants to go to. Have you ever seen an Orthodox Jewish community? Do you know why it thrives? It has a gathering center. It has a community center. The place of worship is separate, but people know where to go because they respond to the needs of the community. If there are hungry people in the community, they have food. If they need services like finding jobs and connecting them with industries, they know where to go. People coming from Israel, coming to the United States, they don't have any problems. You ever hear them having problems integrating? Because they find spaces where the community's needs are met. In the Christian church, people like to stand back and point fingers and judge. And while they're sitting there and judging, hell is breaking loose in their homes. But as long as they come and put on a face, you know why it seemed like it was hell breaking loose in their homes? It wasn't. You know what it is? While it was facing you in the public, in your congregation to deal with, you weren't paying it attention. What if I bring it into your home for you to see it? Then you're going to have to deal with it. Now what? Deal with that. Let me see how you're going to deal with that. So you over here pointing fingers at people, calling them names. Okay, so then your son shows up and says, I'm gay and I'm not going to get married to inherit your money. You can keep it. Or your daughter shows up and says, I don't even know what I am. Meanwhile, you're busy telling others that they have a demon on them. The church missed its mark. Trust me. The church totally missed its mark. And it's not just in post-industrial cities. It's across the board, period. The Christian church had one assignment: love one another. Meet the needs of your community. They didn't follow through on that. But there's one thing you can find Christian pastors doing right now. You know what that is? It's supporting political candidates who promote racism, who promote segregation, who promote hatred of others. That you can find Christian pastors doing right now. There's so many people right now who are gender biased and who don't even know what they are. Are we, as a church, is a Christian community responding to that? There are men right now who come to church. They acted out before you, but you act like you don't see, but you're ready to lay hands on them and speak in tongues. But you're not responding to their needs. People are homeless, sleeping in their cars on the bridges. The church, oh no, they will never open their space of worship. Remember Joel Osteen? We all loved him, including me. Disclaimer. I thought he was the real deal until Hurricane Katrina, was it Katrina, passed through Houston. And he wouldn't open his church so people could be sheltered from the rain. Well, his church is emptying out. He's not as effective as he once was, because can he convince anybody that he has the love of God in him? So that big place that was once a sports arena, well, they're going to find ways to repurpose it. But when I look at other faiths, they have the model of meeting the needs of their community. They respond to that. But Catholic church, but Christian churches, nah, not so fast. Every now and then they do a little program, they get a grant, they do a little program, and then they shut down. I'm telling you right now, it feels like 12 degrees in Detroit. because we're a peninsula. So we have lakes over here that influence. So lakes on the eastern side of Michigan, lakes on the western side of Michigan. Right? Lakes on the northern end of Michigan. In fact, rivers and lakes separate us from Canada, from mainland Canada. Right? It's cold here. There are people walking the streets who are homeless. Detroit's major churches are closed. The buildings are closed. The caretaker might be there, but there ain't nobody in there. Children today, there are parents right now who have to be at work. The children have to go to latchkey so the parents can work. Do you know where Detroit churches are? They're closed. They don't operate a latchkey for people who go to their church. Not even if they were to say, well, you got to be a member of the church to enjoy. They ain't doing that. They look at you. I ain't into all that. I ain't doing that. But come Sunday morning on Wednesday night or Tuesday night or whenever, they want to collect your tithe though. People are homeless. They're not helping. They're not doing blankets. They're not opening their church as a warming center for the homeless to take a break. That's not my thing. I don't want them in here. They smell. You smell. Your Christianity reeks of idiocy and hypocrisy because you do not reflect the love of Christ that Christianity is based on. How dare us? How dare us call ourselves Christians and dare to say that we serve a God who is filled with love, and yet we hate people. People come up to pray and say, I got an issue. I got a thorn in my side. I think I'm having issues. I'm wrestling with the fact. I'm fighting myself. I don't know if I'm gay. I don't know if I want a man or I want a woman. Let me rebuke that and put... No. How about talking to them and showing them God loves them anyway? You created people. You have a heaven or hell to put people in? How dare you? And you look around in your family and the same struggle is going on in other members of your family. How dare us? What will we do with our abandoned churches? The bigger question is, how did we get here? How did the churches become abandoned? For the reasons I just listed. We were ignorant to the needs of the community. We were so busy having church, we forgot that these were people. People stopped clapping, and at the end of 2 hours, they have to walk home to foreclosure. They have to walk home to joblessness. They have to walk home to a husband who is cheating or a wife who is cheating. They have to walk home to fatherlessness. A single mother has to sit down there and figure out what she's going to do with the rest of the week. You want me to give you all my tithe, but I have to feed my children and buy gas for the rest of the week and pay my car note. I remember once I was in a church, and I was an ordained minister at that church. And they asked me why I don't give more money. And I said, because I needed to take care of my children. I said, I don't earn as much. And when I do earn, what I earn, I have to make sure that during the week I can feed my kids, make sure they have gas, make sure the lights are on, the phones are on. You see what I'm saying? They couldn't understand that because their edict is rob yourself, take it from yourself. The pastor even used to say, don't pay your rent or your mortgage, give the tithe to the church first. And I used to say, are you crazy? You're sending people into poverty. And people believed it because they thought that that's what God said. So they used the scripture, Malachi 3:8. They forgot to tell the people that that was the Old Testament and that's what Jesus came. You hear the name of the religion? What is the name of the religion? Christianity. Based on Christ, Jesus Christ. But they used the Old Testament and forgot that the life of Jesus was that he tore down what they used to, what? To hurt the people and oppress the people. They don't preach that part of it. They don't encourage people around that. Jesus said, love one another. You see somebody struggling with their gender identity, or they say, love them. What's up? Still love them. One time I went to a community of people, of black men who were gay, who are gay. And I recognized right in that moment how much the church, the Christian church, had missed its mark. They were in there and they were broken, and they shouldn't be. They were broken emotionally and spiritually, and they shouldn't be if they had received the right instruction, if they had received the love of God. They shouldn't be. And I knew then that the Christian church had made its mark. I had to leave because I felt bad, because I couldn't really call myself a Christian and a pastor. I'm going to tell people that? Huh? Well, what happened to the rest of your tribe? What did they do? Right? This is how the church missed its mark. Because we were asleep at the switch. We paid more attention to the traditions of men rather than listen to the very people. You are the shepherd. They send a group of people to you. Listen to their needs. Talk to them. Counsel them. Instruct them. Show them the love of God. Open the doors of your church and let the warmth in. Let the people come in and get the warmth. You have a big church, you can open a whole side to make the homeless sleep. See, the problem is, you're going to say, well, that would make Harriet, that mean that would drive out the rest of the people who are coming. Well, then they're not Christian. Clean it up. You got to go, sis. Okay. Hi. Bless you. Thank you. Right? Thank you. Thank you for joining me. Thank you. See you next time. Right? But you see what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm saying? Open the church and let the homeless in. It's cold outside. You got in your car nice and warm from your warm building, and you're going to drive to your warm house. And then you're going to call yourself a Christian. Now, I don't have any problems with you if you are like the guy who owns Rock Financial or something, because he doesn't profess to be a purveyor of the gospel. He's just a businessman looking for profit. But you call yourself that you represent Christ, but you don't have a building to put people in who are hurting, God's people. They don't have to tell you that they believe in Christ. No, they're people. They're human beings. The Bible says in Psalm 24, He created the world and everyone in it, the world and they that dwell therein. The world and they that dwell. That means everybody, every tongue, every nationality, every ethnic group. God created human beings. Created the animals too. He created human beings. Some of you all claim you're Christian, but you love your dog more than you love a human being. You'd rather take your dog and spend $1,200 a month on your dog than give to a charity that is helping people. But you call yourselves good people. Some of you all put your children out and your niece and your nephew out because they come and say, I have an issue. Your teenage daughter get pregnant and you put her out to go live with some jackass who got her pregnant. What do you expect? While you're busy, you're not paying attention to what's going on in your house. Your daughter reading stuff on the internet. Your son building bombs on the internet. You're not figuring out who they're talking to and which groups they're in. Come back one day dressed like a vampire. And you're like, oh my God, I gotta cast this demon out. Too late, the demon looking at you like I'm your child. Really? Sincerely? Too busy not talking to our children. But we're going down to the church and laying hands on people. What hypocrites we are. Right? What hypocrites we are. Call yourselves a Christian, but we never met the needs of the community in which we live. Every community has a specific need. What might be true for the folks on the east side of Detroit might not apply to the folks on the west side of Detroit. What might be true for the folks on the south side of Chicago might not be the reality for those on the other side. Address the needs of the community that you're in. That's what the Islamic faith does. That's what the Buddhist temples do. They find out what do people need and they meet the need. It's as common. But Christianity, We're fluffed up and puffed up. But we're going to get on TV and tell people that their dreams will die if you don't send $1,000. That's Paula White. Yeah. But they want to get behind political leaders because they like the spotlight. That's the thing I have observed about Christianity and about Christian people, Christian churches and Christian leaders. They love the spotlight. They love to stand before the cameras. What is their fascination with the spotlight? They want to become celebrities. They want to be celebrated for being seen, but they don't want to be celebrated. They're not being celebrated for doing anything that is impacting the community. Some of them, if they're going to do anything at all, they call every TV camera in the city to shine a light on it. Can you just do it? You don't need the cameras. Just make a mark on somebody's life. Like right now, go open the darn church. Let the homeless people come in. Call the same TV cameras and tell them that such and such a church can accommodate 50 homeless people for the next 7 days until the weather gets back to normal. How about that? And let the TV cameras show up and put it out there on the news wires. It's unbelievable. So you talk about what will America do with its abandoned churches? That's a darn good question. Well, right now they're converting them to performance spaces. But if by any chance another denomination or another faith can take it over, it will be a whole different ballgame. In looking at what's happening to abandoned churches and how they're becoming vacant, it's also telling us about the country. Socially, we're changing. Immigration has had its impact. Now there are people who are Islamic and there are people who are Buddhist, who are looking for worship centers and are converting what used to be Christian churches into worship centers. You know what it is? It's leveling down. It's leveling the playing field so one group doesn't feel that it's mightier than the other. One group doesn't feel, because Islam worships God. Muhammad is their prophet. But they worship God. They refer to God as Allah. I say all praise be to the Most High God. They say all praise be to Allah. They're still talking about God. Buddhists are a whole different thing, right? But essentially, at the heart of all of these world religions, they're searching for peace and love. A way to ratify what I feel in here, that I can express it in a way that I receive some sort of spiritual direction. Right? Let me see what folks are saying. Wear my head wrap. God bless America. Oh boy. People talking all kind of stuff. Right? I only have a few more minutes. I'm surprised that they haven't given me the wrap-up signal yet. I thought it was well over. Right? But I want us, as we close this morning, I want us to think seriously about that. I want us to think about what direction are we headed in as a nation. We have no compassion. Can I just ask you something? When you drive past someone on the streets, whether you call them a panhandler or something, when you drive past them, do you say, "But for the grace of God go I"? Or do you just keep on driving? That's a loser, let them stay over there and blah, blah, blah. When you see a homeless person, like today, it's extremely cold. I'm going to be headed out the street in just a moment, right? I'm going to see people huddled. If I drive through downtown, I'm going to see people in this cold, huddled. I'm going to call the cops, tell them this person needs to be transported. And don't tell me about the fact that we don't have any choice, because the politicians, Republican politicians especially, took the provisions for mentally ill people out of budgets, out of state budgets, right? Because they wanted the money to focus on their pet projects. Same Republican politicians who declare that by and large they are Christian in their faith. Same ones. Most of them will tell you they go to services on Sunday morning, but you hate the people. You go to service, seriously, and stand beside someone But then when you go to the legislative house, you enact policies that marginalize people. You claim to serve God. God says he loves all people, but you create programs that hurt the people whom God loves. But you love God though. Look at your hypocrisy. We need to look inward. We need to look at ourselves. And if you have the money, go buy a church. Repurpose it. Make it a community center. That's my challenge. The Catholic Church needs to give it up. They failed. It took them over 500 years, 600 years, almost 1,000 years. They failed miserably. They created a public policy called celibacy that is absolutely ridiculous. Hence the reason why the Renaissance movement happened and the Lutherans took over. It was like, are you crazy? Man was made to be with woman. Woman was made to be with man. Are you going to tell people that they need to be celibate? How long was that going to last? And instead what you did was you hurt children. You had sex with children. It was one thing if the Catholic priests were taking women and grown men into their, into their places to have sex with. Instead, they were feeding on their own population, the vulnerable, the children. That not perversion to you? Something not wrong with that picture? And now you expect people to come and believe in the God that you say you serve. Ain't gonna fly. Looks like all ceremony to me. I don't know. I've read the scriptures. The Bible is the word of God. I've read it. I don't see anything like that in there. So there's a disconnect, right? So what is America going to do about these churches? Sell them, donate them to the community. Because we have a problem. The society changed while we were asleep at the switch and going halabashanta katarara, speaking in tongues and all, but not teaching the people how to live. While we were doing that, people were suffering, y'all. People were hurting. People were finding ways to cope with the issues of life. And the church shut their doors and shut their hearts and shut the doors of their hearts. And now they're sitting empty. And guess what? There's no coming back. There's no coming back. No coming back. It's done. Right? I understand the way media attacks your religion, but don't you think you're doing the same? Sharia law is a tradition of men that says stone women. I don't support that foolishness. Any fundamental, let me just be clear, any ideology that oppresses people, I don't support. So Sharia law that says women shouldn't do this, there's no way I'm ever going to succumb to that foolishness. I'm looking at their actions, and I'm looking at where they intersect with the community and provide services to the community. That's what I'm examining. The love of God that they claim and manifested, where they beat women and stone women. You think I'm going to side with that? I'll pick up a stone myself and try touching me. You will find out real quick. Right? Right? So no. Right? The second question that you asked is, am I criticizing Christianity? The media attacks Christianity? Yes, I have to, because I have to hold them accountable. I expect you to hold me accountable. When I open a church, I expect you to come and say, Harry, are you meeting the needs of the community? And I have to be able to demonstrate that I'm meeting the needs of the community that I find myself in. It's not an attack. That's what they promote. It's not an attack. It's accountability. We're supposed to be, the idea of the Christian church was that we meet the needs of the people. We're not. And that's it. There's always bad players in any religion, but not all of us are like that. Well, no, but clearly you are not. Clearly you are not. There are bad players in every religion. There are parts of Islam that is so extremely fundamental. One of the things I learned about Islam, because I looked at it and I did some research on it. One of the things I learned about Islam is that the Islam that is practiced here in the Americas and in Europe is different from the Islam that you'll find on the ground in Pakistan. That over there is extreme and fundamental. The folks who are Americanized and cultured according to Western culture don't identify with that. That form, it hasn't evolved. But they claim they love God. You see what I'm saying? They claim they love God, and in the name of God, they hurt people. That's not the love of God. And they claim that God loves everybody, but you're going to stone a woman for having sex, but you don't stone the man. Why you don't put the two of them together and stone them? You don't believe in freedom of the individual, that people can make choices and then it's between them and God. First of all, Islam is not a religion I could associate with, because they don't believe in forgiveness. They don't know what that is. They don't teach forgiveness. You do something, you're wrong, your hand get cut off, your foot get cut off. That's all they do. I can't do with extremism like that. Any form of extremism is always dangerous in its practice and execution. Right? You get that? Any form of extremism. So any religion that practices extremism is dangerous in its practice and execution. You see it with Christianity when they go support rogue political candidates who want to who practice Jim Crow laws, right? And execute Jim Crow laws. You see it in some part in Islam where they're going to cut women off. ISIS, whom the president claims that he got rid of. ISIS, in its practice Islam. Did you know that when ISIS went into villages, they took the young girls and women under 30? Did you know they kept them in a commune so that their soldiers could have sex with them? They were having sex with young girls, and when the girls started having periods and developed infections, they would cast them aside. I kid you not, ISIS did that in the name of religion. You're not going to expect me to support that. And rogue governments allowed that to happen. Right? You see what I'm saying? You see the problems we have? You see? We take a pure form of worship and we attach our own ideas to it. We call it Islam, we call it all kinds of names, Christianity, and we pollute it. And then we teach others to go practice and execute the polluted form of it. I am just saying, as a Christian, I am holding Christians accountable for saying that you love God, but you don't demonstrate the love of God to people. I was one of them. I was a single mother who walked into a church with 2 children. And you would not believe that there were other single mothers in that church. They pilloried me and vilified me and victimized me because I declared that I'm going to serve God. And I was divorced. Right? Meanwhile, they had people in the church who were doing worse. The pastor was having sex with everybody, but they vilified me. And I had to come to, have that come to Jesus moment, like, what's up? What's going on here? And I did tell you, I said it. I said one day the church is going to be empty. I couldn't believe it because you're not responding to the needs of the community. Right? 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 I gotta go. I love you all and I love talking to you all. Let me see. A manifestation of life to learn their own power, not to bow or kneel. I know, and the thing about it is, I'm not the only one who goes through that. You see what I'm saying? Thank you for your empathy. But I'm not the only one who goes through that. It was going through experiences like that that made me realize that we missed the mark. You see what I'm saying? And I determined I was still going to be ordained so that I would have the authority and the level of authority to come and speak to you. So you would receive me. My actual title is a reverend, believe it or not. Right? Right? Thanks everybody. This is Harriet Kamick with Down to Earth. Join us again. And remember to visit our page on Apple, Spotify. Come on, folks. I need you to support this podcast. Go to Anchor FM. Click on support this podcast. Thank you for your support. Tell others about us. Tell others how much you're enjoying our podcast and our live feeds on Twitter. Right? I see it's showing up all over my timeline. So tell others about it. right? Support us and continue to listen to us. I appreciate you and your feedback. This is Harriet Kemrick with Down to Earth. We examine the issues that really matter. I love you all. Thanks, everybody. Be blessed.